My name is Lisa, and I need to tell you about the birthday that changed everything. I was turning 20. Nothing extravagant, just 6 friends, homemade cupcakes, and a quiet night at home. But 2 hours before anyone was supposed to arrive, my sister Barbara had a meltdown about her appearance, and my parents made their choice. My father looked at me and said, "Be reasonable, Lisa. Your sister isn't emotionally stable today. Try again another time." Just like that, my birthday became a threat to Barbara's ego. And just like that, I realized I'd been living in a house where my existence was only acceptable when I made myself small. So at 12:09 a.m., on the first minutes of my 20th year, I left, and I never went back. 20 is supposed to be the bridge between being someone's child and becoming your own person. For me, it became the moment I realized I was never going to be more than a backdrop in a house that treated my sister like a museum piece. My birthday wasn't about me. It was about Barbara's feelings and my parents' obsession with keeping her emotionally comfortable. And I was expected to surrender one more piece of myself, so the golden child wouldn't have to share a single moment of attention. I didn't argue for long. I knew exactly how that conversation would end. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, placed the tray of cupcakes I'd baked myself on the counter, and went upstairs to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the messages from the 6 friends I'd invited, the simple plans I'd made with my own money. Then I looked at the duffel bag sitting in my closet, the one I'd been telling myself was just for college visits. When the clock finally slid past 11:59 and into the first minute of my 20th year, I picked up that bag, filled it with everything that mattered, and walked down the stairs. I passed my parents' room, where they were still consoling Barbara. I closed the front door behind me at exactly 12:09 a.m. No one followed me. No one called my name. 3 years later, my father would beg me to come back and save the same sister they had chosen over me that night. And my answer would shatter everything the Lawrence family had built their identity on. Before I tell you what he said and what happened in the years after I walked out that door, tell me, what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. Looking back, the imbalance in my family didn't happen all at once. It crept in slowly, the way water carves through stone, invisible at first but with devastating permanence. As a child, I didn't have words for what I felt. I just knew that in our house, beauty had a direction, and it always pointed toward Barbara. My older sister had always been the centerpiece of every family photo, every holiday, every casual Sunday afternoon. It wasn't subtle. Click the subscribe button, like, and tell me in the comments where you are watching so I can send you a hug. Your support helps us bring more mind-blowing stories. And trust me, you wouldn't want to miss them. Looking back, the imbalance in my family didn't begin that night. It had been building since childhood, the way water carves through stone, slowly, invisibly, but with devastating permanence. As a kid, I didn't have the language for what I was experiencing. I just knew that in our house, mirrors were everywhere, and none of them seemed to reflect me. Barbara was the one they saw. Barbara was the investment. Barbara was the masterpiece they'd been perfecting since she was old enough to smile for a camera. And I, Lisa, was simply the frame that made the picture complete. The Lawrence household wasn't just a home, it was a shrine. And Barbara was the deity we all worshipped. I'm not exaggerating when I say there were mirrors everywhere. Above the fireplace in the living room, along the entire hallway leading to the bedrooms, on the back of Barbara's closet door, even behind the dining table where we ate dinner every night. My mother said they opened up the space, made rooms feel larger. But I knew the truth. They were there so Barbara could check her reflection between bites of salad, so she could adjust her posture before answering a question, so she never had to go more than 30 seconds without confirming she was still beautiful. My parents didn't call it obsession, they called it investment. By the time Barbara was 12, my mother had spent thousands on her appearance. Pageant entry fees, professional photographers for her portfolio, styling sessions where consultants taught her how to walk, how to tilt her chin, how to smile without showing too much gum. My father kept a folder of Barbara's pageant photos in his car, not family photos, just Barbara, and he'd pull them out at business dinners like they were stock certificates proving his worth. "This is my daughter Barbara," he'd say, sliding a glossy 8x10 across the table. "She's going to be a model. Natural elegance, you know. Can't teach that." Meanwhile, I sat in the back seat during those dinners, waiting in the car with a book and a bag of fast food my mother grabbed on the way. I wasn't invited inside. It wasn't personal, they said. It's just that Barbara photographs better, and these dinners were about making impressions. I became known in our house as the simple one. Not stupid. They never said that. Just uncomplicated. I didn't need special shampoo or dermatologist appointments or custom-tailored dresses. I wore jeans and t-shirts from Target. I pulled my hair into a ponytail. I didn't know how to contour or highlight or bronze, and nobody offered to teach me. The patterns showed up in small ways first. Barbara always got the window seat on road trips. Barbara got to choose what we watched on TV. On holidays, Barbara opened her gifts first while everyone watched, cameras ready. My gifts came afterward, unwrapped quickly while my mother cleaned up the discarded ribbons from Barbara's pile. In every family photo, Barbara stood in the center. I stood to the side, slightly behind, my face half cut off in most shots. After a while, I started positioning myself there automatically. I knew where I belonged. I learned early that the safest way to exist in the Lawrence house was to be helpful without being seen. I did the dishes without being asked. I kept my room clean. I got good grades quietly, never making a fuss when they went unnoticed. I didn't complain when Barbara borrowed my things without asking, or when my mother missed my school events because Barbara had a photo shoot, or when my birthday gifts cost a fraction of what Barbara received on a random Tuesday. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I didn't need what Barbara needed. I told myself I preferred being in the background. By the time I reached high school, the dynamic had calcified into something that felt permanent. Barbara was the beautiful one. I was the practical one. That was just how our family worked. I didn't know then that you could love a family and still be slowly erased by them. I spent 2 weeks planning my 20th birthday, not because I wanted something extravagant. I didn't. I just wanted something that was mine. 6 friends, home-cooked pasta, maybe a movie afterward. Simple, quiet, harmless. When I asked my mother if she'd pick up a cake from the grocery store, she looked at me like I'd requested an ice sculpture. "A cake is too expensive for just a few friends, Lisa. Don't be wasteful." So I bought the ingredients myself and spent the afternoon before my birthday baking cupcakes in our kitchen. Chocolate with vanilla frosting. Nothing fancy, but I was proud of them. I arranged them on a tray and set them on the counter, ready for that evening. That's when I heard Barbara's voice rising from upstairs. It started as frustration, then escalated into full panic. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, she was standing in front of her full-length mirror, mascara already running, pulling at her dress with shaking hands. "It makes me look wide," she sobbed. "My hair won't sit right. Everyone's going to look at me and think I'm ugly." My mother rushed past me without a glance, wrapping Barbara in her arms. Sweetheart, no. You're beautiful. You're always beautiful. I can't be seen like this, Barbara wailed. I can't. I just can't. I stood in the doorway, invisible as always. My father appeared behind me, assessed the situation, and made his decision in approximately 4 seconds. Lisa. His voice was calm, matter of fact. Be reasonable. Your sister isn't emotionally stable today. We can't have a party when she's like this. I stared at him. My friends are coming in 2 hours. Try again another time when your sister's well. Not, I'm sorry. Not, let's figure this out. Just, try again another time. As if my birthday was a library book I could renew at my convenience. Something fractured inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet crack, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. I didn't argue. I simply walked downstairs, picked up my phone, and started texting. 6 messages, each one harder to type than the last. Hey, I'm so sorry. Something came up. Have to cancel tonight. The responses came quickly. Confusion, disappointment, concern. I turned my phone face down and went to my bedroom. I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the clock. 7:47 p.m. My friends would have been arriving soon. 8:15 p.m. We'd be laughing, eating, celebrating. 9:30 p.m. Maybe watching a movie. Someone making a terrible joke about me being old now. Instead, I sat alone while my parents comforted Barbara down the hall. Somewhere around 10 p.m., clarity arrived. Not anger, not revenge, just crystal clear understanding. I wasn't leaving because I was hurt. I was leaving because staying meant accepting that this would be my life forever. Erased. Cancelled. Asked to be smaller so someone else could be comfortable. I pulled the duffel bag from my closet and started packing. 1 pair of jeans, 3 shirts, underwear, socks, my laptop, the small amount of cash I'd saved. I left behind photo albums, yearbooks, childhood stuffed animals. I didn't need souvenirs from a place that never made room for me. At 11:58 p.m., I zipped the bag closed. At 12:09 a.m., officially my birthday, I walked down the stairs one final time. I could hear voices from my parents' room, still comforting Barbara, still managing her crisis. I opened the front door and stepped into the cool night air. In that moment, I wasn't running away. I was walking toward the first birthday gift I'd ever truly given myself. Freedom. Emma lived 20 minutes from my parents' house, in a rental with a basement that smelled like mildew and old carpet. She didn't ask questions when I showed up after midnight with a duffel bag. She just handed me a pillow, pointed to the couch, and said, "Stay as long as you need." The first morning, I woke up disoriented. Sunlight came through a small window near the ceiling. The couch cushions had left marks on my face. For about 30 seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered. And the word homeless hit me like cold water. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Nothing from my parents. I learned later, through a mutual friend, that my mother's first reaction was confusion. Where did Lisa go? Then dismissiveness. She'll be back when she's done being dramatic. My father apparently nodded and went back to reading his newspaper. They didn't call. They didn't search. They assumed I was throwing a tantrum and would crawl back apologizing within 48 hours. By day 3, when I still hadn't returned, they simply moved on. The shock of leaving wore off by the end of the first week, and reality crashed in hard. I had $823 in my bank account. No job, no plan. Just a duffel bag and a friend's basement. I found a position at a 24-hour cafe on the edge of town. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Minimum wage plus tips. The manager hired me on the spot because nobody wanted to work those hours. I started that same evening. The exhaustion was immediate and relentless. I'd sleep during the day on Emma's couch, wake up groggy, and drag myself to the cafe to serve coffee to truck drivers, insomniacs, and college students cramming for exams. My feet ached. My eyes burned. Some nights, I'd stand at the espresso machine and forget what I was doing mid-pour. 2 weeks later, I received my first paycheck, $347.82 after taxes. I stared at that number for a long time. It felt simultaneously like everything and nothing. Enough to prove I could survive on my own. Not nearly enough to feel secure. I lived out of that duffel bag for months. 2 pairs of jeans, 4 shirts. I rotated them on a schedule, washing clothes in Emma's machine when she wasn't home, hanging them to dry on a rack in the corner of the basement. I showered in a shared bathroom, kept my toiletries in a grocery bag, learned to exist in the smallest possible space. But there were small graces. Emma never made me feel like a burden. My coworkers at the cafe didn't ask why a 20-year-old was working graveyard shifts. They just showed me how to work the register and left me alone. 3 weeks in, I had my first breakdown. It happened in the cafe storage room during a slow shift. I was restocking napkins when something inside me just collapsed. I sat on the floor between boxes of coffee cups and cried into my hands. The temptation to go home, to apologize, to accept my role, to have a real bed again, was overwhelming. But then my shift ended, and I walked out into the early morning light. I caught my reflection in the cafe window. Hair in a messy bun, wearing an apron covered in coffee stains, dark circles under my eyes. I didn't recognize myself, but I liked the stranger I saw. She looked tired, but she also looked free. I was learning that survival isn't glamorous. It's choosing yourself over comfort, again and again. Even when you're bone tired and your family doesn't notice you're gone. 6 months after leaving home, I signed a lease on a room in a shared house 15 minutes from the cafe. It cost $450 a month plus utilities. The room was 8 feet by 10 feet, barely bigger than a walk-in closet, with a single window that overlooked an alley where people threw their trash. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I unpacked that duffel bag into an actual closet with real hangers. I put my laptop on a desk someone left behind. I hung a cheap poster on the wall. And for the first time since leaving the Lawrence house, I closed a door that was mine to close. By then, I was working 2 jobs. Cafe nights, retail on weekends. I was exhausted constantly, surviving on 4-hour sleep cycles and gas station coffee. But I was surviving. And some days, that felt like winning. During slow cafe shifts, those dead hours between 2 and 5 a.m. when nobody came in, I discovered online courses. Free ones at first, then cheap ones when I could afford them. Marketing basics, graphic design fundamentals, social media management. I'd watch tutorial videos on my phone, taking notes on napkins I'd shove into my apron pocket. I wasn't learning these things because I had a plan. I was learning them because it felt like building something, like becoming someone. My first freelance client came through a coworker's friend who needed a logo for their dog walking business. They paid me $50. $50 for something I created, something that didn't exist before I made it. I cried when the payment hit my account. Slowly, I started making friends who knew nothing about mirrors or beauty pageants or golden children. I met people at the cafe, at my retail job, through random conversations that turned into coffee dates. They asked me about music I liked, food I enjoyed, hobbies I wanted to try, and I realized I didn't know. I'd spent 20 years liking whatever didn't compete with Barbara's preferences, so I started figuring it out. I tried different music genres until I found ones that made me feel something. I cooked meals just for myself and discovered I actually hated the bland, diet-focused food my mother always made. I bought a used guitar from a pawn shop and taught myself 3 chords. My 21st birthday arrived on a Tuesday. I worked my cafe shift, came home, and bought myself a single cupcake from the grocery store. I sat on my bed in my tiny room, lit a candle I stuck in the frosting, and sang happy birthday to myself. It should have been sad, but it wasn't. It was chosen, and that made all the difference. 2 months later, I saw a job posting for a receptionist at a co-working space downtown. Better hours, better pay, actual career potential. I almost didn't apply. The imposter syndrome was deafening. Who are you to want more? You're the girl who couldn't even keep her own birthday. But I applied anyway. And somehow, impossibly, I got an interview. Then a second interview. Then a phone call offering me the position. I accepted while sitting on the bus, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. For the first time in my life, I was being chosen for something. Not as Barbara's sister, not as the Lawrences' spare daughter, just as Lisa. The co-working space was nothing like anywhere I'd ever worked. It was full of people who believed they deserved to take up space. Entrepreneurs pitching wild ideas, creatives designing things that didn't exist yet, freelancers who'd bet everything on themselves and somehow made it work. I answered phones and greeted clients, but mostly I absorbed their energy, the way they walked into rooms like they belonged there, the way they talked about their work with unashamed pride, the way they treated setbacks as temporary and success as inevitable. It was intoxicating. 8 months into the job, one of the regular clients mentioned her company was looking for a marketing intern. She handed me her card casually, said I should apply. I held that card for 3 days, staring at it like it might disappear. People like me don't get opportunities like this, but I applied anyway. And somehow I nailed the interview. I talked about the freelance work I'd done, the courses I'd taken, the campaigns I'd studied during those lonely cafe shifts. They offered me the internship on the spot. 3 months later, they offered me a full-time position. My first real salary was enough to afford my own studio apartment. Not shared, not a room in someone's house. An entire apartment that was mine. I found it on a Tuesday. A tiny studio on the 4th floor of an old building with a window that overlooked the city lights. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was barely functional. The bathroom was smaller than my childhood closet. But it had a door with a lock, and my name would be the only one on the lease. Move-in day. I stood in the empty space with 2 suitcases and a box of kitchen supplies. Every dish, every towel, every fork had been purchased by me. Chosen by me. I closed the front door and locked it from the inside, and something in my chest loosened. This was mine. I built that apartment slowly, mismatched furniture from thrift stores, art prints I actually liked. Not what someone told me was tasteful. Plants I kept alive through sheer determination and YouTube tutorials. A bookshelf filled with books I wanted to read, not books that looked impressive. At work, I started leading campaigns. My ideas got implemented. Clients asked for me specifically. I got a raise. Then another one. But the bigger shift was internal. I started therapy. Journaling. Learning that my worth wasn't tied to being useful or invisible or accommodating. I started dressing for myself. Not Barbara's shadow, not my mother's approval. Just me. Strangers started complimenting me. Not my appearance exactly. My energy, my confidence, my smile. One woman at a coffee shop told me I radiated something special, and I almost cried because no one in my family had ever seen me that way. I realized beauty had nothing to do with being chosen by the people who raised you. It had everything to do with choosing yourself. I dated casually, learned to accept affection without performing for it, learned I didn't have to shrink to make someone comfortable. My 23rd birthday arrived on a Saturday. 6 friends, real friends who knew me, not my family's story, took me to dinner. They showed up because they wanted to. We laughed until my face hurt. No one canceled. No one cried. No one made it about anything except celebrating me. I finally understood what I'd been searching for in that house of mirrors, not their validation, just the freedom to exist without shrinking. I didn't learn what happened at home until much later. Pieces came through mutual acquaintances, social media whispers, and eventually, through the desperate messages my parents would send. But the story, when I finally assembled it, was both predictable and devastating. Without me there to absorb the overflow, Barbara became the sole focus of my parents' obsession. And the pressure that had once been distributed between 2 daughters now crushed down on one. Every photo Barbara posted got dissected at the dinner table. The lighting, the angle, her expression. My mother would compare current photos to ones from 6 months prior, looking for signs of aging, weight gain, or declining engagement metrics. You only got 200 likes on this one. What's different? Barbara's modeling career, which had been modest but steady, started stalling. She missed castings because of panic attacks. Her weight fluctuated as stress eating alternated with restrictive dieting. Agencies that had once shown interest stopped returning calls. My mother's response was to increase control. More treatments, more stylists, more products, more rules about what Barbara could eat, wear, post. The house that had always been a beauty pageant became a pressure cooker. Then came the pageant disaster. Barbara was competing in a regional competition, her first in 2 years. She made it through the swimsuit round. But during the evening gown portion, standing under those bright lights with hundreds of eyes on her, she froze. Then she started crying. Not delicate, camera-ready tears, ugly, gasping sobs. She walked off stage mid-presentation and locked herself in the bathroom. She was disqualified, obviously. But worse than that, someone filmed it. The video circulated in local pageant circles. Barbara Lawrence's breakdown became a cautionary tale about pressure and mental health. Her friends started disappearing. Not all at once, but gradually. They got tired of the constant drama, the canceled plans, the conversations that only ever centered on Barbara's appearance and anxiety. Her social circle, which had once revolved around her, simply stopped revolving. Barbara's room became her prison. She stopped leaving except for therapy appointments my mother forced her to attend. She'd stand in front of her mirrors for hours, obsessing over perceived flaws. Some days she wouldn't eat. Other days she wouldn't stop crying. My father watched his investment crumbling. He'd sunk tens of thousands into Barbara's potential, and now she could barely leave her bedroom. I heard later that he and my mother argued constantly about what went wrong, each blaming the other's parenting style, never acknowledging the system they'd built together. Sometimes, in her clearer moments, Barbara would ask about me. "Where is Lisa? Why doesn't she call?" My mother's response was always the same. "She abandoned us. She chose herself over family. That's not what family does." Barbara's Instagram went dark. No posts for months. Extended family members started reaching out with concerned messages. Is Barbara okay? We haven't seen her in so long. The Lawrence family's carefully constructed image was crumbling. My father's business associates noticed Barbara's absence from events. My mother's friends asked pointed questions she couldn't answer without admitting failure. The truth they couldn't say out loud was simple. They'd broken their golden child with expectations no human could carry. They'd polished her until there was nothing left but anxiety and self-doubt. They'd made her beauty her entire identity. And when that identity cracked, she shattered completely. And the daughter who could have been an emotional anchor, who could have shown Barbara what it looked like to exist without performance, that daughter had already saved herself. And in the quiet space where Lisa used to absorb their chaos, the Lawrence family began to drown in the pressure they'd created. The first message came 3 years and 2 months after I left. It was from my mother. Casual. Almost cheerful. "Hi Lisa, just checking in. Hope you're well." I stared at those words for 10 minutes. My thumb hovered over the reply button. The old pull was immediate. The instinct to respond, to reassure, to make things comfortable for everyone else. But I locked my phone and put it in a drawer. 2 weeks later, another message. "Your sister asks about you." Then my father chimed in, his text as businesslike as an email to a colleague. "We should discuss family matters. Call when convenient." The guilt arrived like an old friend I'd forgotten I didn't want to see. What if Barbara really needs me? What if something's seriously wrong? I caught myself drafting responses, then deleting them, writing explanations, then erasing them. Over the next 2 months, the messages escalated. My phone became a weapon of emotional manipulation disguised as family concern. My mother left a voicemail, her voice thick with tears. "Barbara needs you, Lisa. Please come home. She's not well, and we don't know what else to do." My father's voicemail was stern, almost angry. "This family needs to stay together. You've been selfish long enough. It's time to come back and help your sister." The manipulation tactics were textbook. Guilt. "After everything we've done for you." Obligation. "Family is forever, Lisa. You can't just abandon us." Shame. "Your sister is suffering, and you're living your life like nothing's wrong." My friends urged me not to engage. Emma said bluntly, "They had 3 years to apologize. They didn't. That tells you everything." My therapist helped me see what I already knew but didn't want to admit. They didn't need me. They needed something. A fixer. A buffer. An emotional band-aid for problems they created. Then came the final voicemail from my father. His voice wasn't stern this time, it was broken. "Lisa, your sister needs you. Your mother needs you. We all need you. Please come home." I listened to it 3 times, sitting in my apartment, the one I'd built with my own hands and my own choices. Each time, I listened for the words that would have mattered. "We're sorry. We were wrong. We see you now." They never came. I drafted a response. Deleted it. Wrote another one. Deleted that too. I imagined returning home as the hero. Walking in, fixing everything, finally being valued. Finally being seen as essential instead of optional. But then reality cut through the fantasy. If I went back, I wouldn't be returning as an equal. I'd be returning to the same role I'd always played. Emotional caretaker, Barbara's shadow, the daughter whose job was to make everyone else comfortable while disappearing herself. They weren't offering me a place at the table. They were asking me to crawl back under it. I realized they weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because they finally needed the daughter they'd spent 20 years teaching to disappear. I sat in my apartment on a Friday night, city lights glowing through my window, and finally wrote the message I'd been avoiding for weeks. 3 years. That's how long it took my parents to reach out. 3 years of building myself from nothing. From a girl sleeping on a couch to a woman with her own apartment, her own career, her own life. 3 years of learning that I could exist without their validation. And now they wanted me back. Not because they missed me, because they needed something I could provide. I opened my phone and started typing. Mom and Dad, I've received your messages. I hope Barbara gets the professional help she needs. I genuinely do. But I won't be coming back to fix what you broke. For 20 years, you taught me that my worth was measured by how little space I took up. You taught me that my job was to be invisible so Barbara could shine. You taught me that my birthday, my needs, my existence were all negotiable, and Barbara's never were. I've spent 3 years learning the opposite. I've built a life where my worth isn't tied to being smaller than someone else, where I don't have to earn the right to celebrate my own birthday, where the people around me choose me because they value me, not because they need something from me. You taught me I was only valuable when I was invisible. I've spent 3 years learning that I deserve to be seen. I wish you all healing. I hope Barbara finds peace. I hope you both find whatever it is you're looking for. But I won't sacrifice my healing to provide yours. Take care, Lisa. My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Then I pressed it. I turned off my phone and sat in the silence of my apartment. Relief came first, then grief. Not for the family I was losing, but for the family I'd never really had. Then strength. Quiet, unshakable strength. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match or tearful reunion. Just a boundary, clearly stated, and a door I chose to close. My friends rallied around me that weekend. Emma brought wine, others brought food, stories, laughter. They reminded me that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most. 6 months later, I was promoted to team lead at work. My career was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. My 24th birthday arrived on a Saturday. My friends threw me a rooftop party. Fairy lights, music, genuine celebration. At one point, I stepped away from the crowd and stood at the railing, looking out over the city. I thought about Barbara. I hoped she was finding her way. I hoped she was learning that her worth existed beyond her reflection in a mirror. But I also knew, with absolute certainty, that it wasn't my job to teach her that. It wasn't my job to light a path for people who'd spent years keeping me in the dark. That night, back in my apartment, I caught my reflection in the window. Not in one of those Lawrence family mirrors that only ever reflected Barbara. Just me, in my own space, living my own life. I finally saw myself clearly. Not as the overlooked daughter, not as Barbara's shadow, not as someone who existed to make others comfortable. Just Lisa, whole, free, enough. Some families are built on love. Others are built on roles. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is refuse to play the part they wrote for you. My name is Lisa Lawrence, and it took losing my family to finally find myself. And if you're out there watching this, wondering if you deserve to take up space in your own life, the answer is yes. Always yes. Thank you for being here with me through this story. If it resonated with you, share your time zone below. I want to see how far this journey reaches. And remember, you don't owe anyone your silence.